The Fourier transform is an amazing mathematical tool which enables conversion from one domain to another, for example time to frequency, so that things that might be difficult to find in the time domain can be easily observed in the frequency domain, like these two periodic signals. In this video I'm going to do a little bit of deep dive into the Fourier transform equation and try to understand the inner workings of the Fourier transform with the aid of animations that show all the intermediate steps. In order to do so, there are four critical elements we have to talk about. These include Fourier series, Euler's formula, integration, and orthogonality. To understand how this equation transforms the function ft into the frequency domain, transforming back to the time domain is possible. This is the inverse Fourier transform. Just to mention briefly where the Fourier transform comes from, it all goes back to the heat diffusion problem Fourier studied. The fundamental question was the governing equation he derived himself. How can the temperature solution U along the rod can be found, where the initial temperature is given by an arbitrary function f along the rod? It was this equation Fourier attempted to solve, which we call now Fourier series. It says any arbitrary function f can be represented by some constant plus an infinite summation of sines and cosines. But the important part is how to find these coefficients. For example, in order to represent this function g using sines and cosines, here we start with all coefficients set to 1. How should we mix sines and cosines accordingly in order to represent the function g? And these are the coefficients to use, which will make it possible to represent the function g reasonably well. Of course, if we use more sines, we can do a better job, which we're going to look at later. So the Fourier transform is what makes this possible, finding the coefficients of the approximate function f, given we know the function g. The question is how. In order to answer that, I would like to cover these topics in a step-by-step manner. A bit of a long list maybe, but trust me, understanding every puzzle of the Fourier transform, the last big picture I'm trying to show you will be beautiful, I believe. Change of perspective. I would like to take a simple example, a 100-meter sprint race. We ask how fast the sprinters run. What we are interested in knowing is how many seconds sprinters can finish running 100 meters. So interested in knowing time with respect to distance. Let's take another example, a moving car. This time we are interested in knowing the distance traveled with respect to time. Same speed related phenomenon, but the difference is our perspective, whether we want to say time over distance or distance over time, whichever is easier to convey information. This is what Fourier transform does. The information is the same, but whether we want to see in terms of periods, time per cycle, or in terms of frequency, number of cycles per second, so that we can see the same data with different perspectives. The Fourier series has sine and cosine which are periodic. Where do they come from? Everything starts with a circle. In fact, a circle has a very interesting characteristic. When we start at one point and go around the circle, we come back to the same point where we started. Going backwards is the same, of course. This fact that might be too obvious and simple is the beginning of pretty much everything. To represent where the dot is on the circle, an XY coordinate system can be set up. The width and height of these lines tracking the dot will come back to the same places they started. If the radius r is set to 1, which we call a unit circle, then what's great about this is that the x and y positions become cosine and sine, and they are a function of theta, the angle. This is why trigonometric functions are periodic. These dots starting at one point when moved one revolution, that is 2 pi, they come back to the same values. When rotating backwards is the same story, and if this plane we have becomes a complex plane, then this is essentially what Euler's formula does, connecting the trigonometric functions with an exponential function. We will get back to this later. Fourier series, which represents an arbitrary function f with sines and cosines. I would like to take 3 examples to describe what this equation could mean physically. For example, if you are an electrical engineer, you are probably familiar with this. The constant term is referred to as the DC component, and the other terms are referred to as the AC component because the constant term represents a flat line that does not change over time, which is DC. However, the other terms can represent fluctuating currents, that is AC. Another example is this mass with a spring attached. When it is released from the top and reaches its point where the force of the spring and the gravity pulling the mass are in balance, the constant represents this point where static equilibrium is achieved, and the vibration happens about this point, represented by the AC term of the Fourier series. The last example is sound. This speaker generates a sound, say at a certain frequency. Then the constant term represents the atmospheric pressure, and the fluctuating quantity is represented by the sine and cosine terms. This is precisely why calculating the sound pressure level, RMS pressure, is needed in the equation, because sound is the fluctuating quantity about the mean, that is the atmospheric pressure. So the constant term, what it does is it lifts the entire curve up or down. For now, let's set this to 0 to make things simple. And again, you can represent any arbitrary function like this rectangular wave function. To represent this function, the cosine terms are not required. As we add more and more sine terms, we can see that the approximate function f converges to the function g we are trying to represent. Of course, adding many terms, it will do better. Literally any function is possible, like this triangular shape waveform. How about noise? Yes, possible, but noise is random, so adding phase should be done in a random manner. I hope these examples gave a good visual description of what this Fourier series is telling us, representing any arbitrary function f with a constant and an infinite number of sines and cosines. Euler's formula. It is an important part of the Fourier transform. I want to take a simple example going back to the oscillating mass spring system. Let's say I want to record the vibration of this mass just one cycle. The main question I'm trying to address is how to represent these discrete dots with an analytic function. One obvious option is the sine function, but it has to be shifted the correct amount to the left to capture the dots. Another option is the cosine function. This time it has to be shifted to the right. We can also mix sine and cosine functions with the right amplitudes. The last option, I think you know where I'm getting at, is using Euler's formula. But Euler's formula has complex numbers, so what we have to do is get the real part from it. Representing a periodic signal using Euler's formula can be geometrically described on a complex plane. A dot on a complex plane, which represents a periodic function that is a cosine component and a sine component. This can be represented by a vector with a magnitude and angle. So combining these two integrals of the Fourier transform into a single step is possible. Why Euler's formula is useful is beyond what this video can cover, but one of the main features is with its derivative is the same. When integration is performed, it is itself plus a constant. Truly beautiful. The integration symbol in the Fourier transform kind of stands out. It is obviously there for something important. To put things simply, I like to think of integration as a process to find the area under a curve. Some function f times small chunks dx, starting from the lower bound a to the upper bound b. Finding the area under the curve is useful. For example, if we know the velocity of a moving car, we can simply find the total displacement it traveled by taking integration. One way to find the area under a curve is representing the curve with many bars and adding the area of each bar one by one. Using a simpler math notation, this is how it can be written. Starting from the first bar to the last one, get the heights of each bar, multiply them with the width dx, and add them up. That becomes the total area. This is the Riemann sum, which is an approximation. However, if the size of the bars gets thinner, then the approximation gets better. What the Riemann said was if the width dx approaches 0, the approximation will be the same as the true area found by the integral. This is the Riemann integral. So the integration of any complex function can be fairly well approximated if enough segments are used. But one thing important about the area under the curve is that it has positive and negative signs. For instance, for this sine function, when the area is found, the area becomes 0. So it is important to remember that the integrated area is an area with a sign. This area being 0 is something very important, which we are going to look at in the next topic. The keyword of this topic is correlation. 0 means no correlation or 0% related. 1 means fully correlated, 100% related. When there are two vectors, we find the dot product or inner product between them, and it can be written as these. I'm going to use the expression on the left hand side. In order to take the dot product, the process is straightforward. Take the first components from the two vectors and multiply them. Take the second components and multiply them, and then add them together. In this case, the dot product is 0 because the two vectors are orthogonal, which means 90 degrees apart from each other. The way I like to think about this is that they are 0% related or 0 correlation. One important feature of the dot product is that if you swap the order, it will get you the same result. Let's see how the dot product changes when vector 2 rotates. As shown here, it rotates about 45 degrees and it has about 70% correlation. And when the two vectors point the same direction, it is 100%, which means the same magnitude and direction. If the green vector rotates the other way, let's see what happens. Even though the lengths are the same, since the green vector is looking at the opposite direction, the dot product is -1. This time let's make the green vector twice longer. Okay, even though it's looking at a different direction, the amount of the green vector in the direction of the white vector is 100% related. Coming all the way down, the green vector is twice long. That is why the dot product is 200% related. When the vector size decreases, it becomes 1. When its length becomes the same as the white vector, and becomes 0.5 when its length is half of the white vector. We just saw how to take the dot product of the two vectors, which is finding the relationship between them. How about two different functions? This is how it is done. Function f times function g, then integrated. This we are taking the inner product of the two functions, essentially finding the relationship between the two. Let's see an example. Here is a sine function and here is a cosine function. These two functions are multiplied and integrated, then the area is found. It is 0% related, which means sine and cosine are orthogonal from each other. Let's see how it changes when cosine gets shifted. When the cosine shifts, the inner product continues to change. When the cosine overlaps with the sine, it becomes 1, which means they are 100% related. However, in this case, it is -1, which means same shape but opposite direction. The better way to say is 180 degree out of phase. When the cosine comes back to where it started from, then the inner product becomes 0 again. The same thing can be seen on a complex plane, cosine on the real axis and sine on the imaginary axis. When cosine rotates 90 degrees, the direction and magnitude becomes the same as the sine vector, so the inner product should be 100% related. Rotates 180 degrees, obviously two vectors are perpendicular, so the inner product is 0. To 70 degrees, it's -1, same magnitude but opposite directions. This is essentially what the Fourier transform does, finding the relationship between any arbitrary function f with the cosine function as well as the sine function, or simpler and faster, I think, with the exponential function. Finally, I'm ready to show you the inner workings of the Fourier transform. Let's first expand the term using Euler's formula. To simplify things further, let's look at the term with the sine function first. The example that I'm about to show is actually discrete Fourier transform, but let's not worry about that, as the focus of this video is to understand the underlying concepts. The process is as follows. We have an arbitrary function f, data signal. I oftentimes use these terms interchangeably. Let's say f has a sine signal with a frequency of 3 Hz. I'm going to see what happens when this function is Fourier transformed. The next step is multiplying with a reference function, which is the sine function of frequency 1 Hz. And these two functions are multiplied and then integrated. which is taking the inner product, finding the relationship, and the result will be recorded on the bottom plot. It is 0% related. Okay, I'm going to repeat the same process, but the reference function will be updated to have a frequency of 2 Hz. This time the result is 0. 3 Hz, however, here we have some value obtained, which is 0.5. Looks like it says 50% related. We'll see why it is not 100% later. I'm going to repeat this process up to 10 Hz. So the Fourier transformed plot has zeros everywhere except 3 Hz, which is correct because the function f I manually prepare is a sine signal with only one frequency component at 3 Hz. Next example, let's say the signal has 2 frequency components, 3 Hz and 7 Hz, and set their amplitudes different, 1 and 0.5. Okay, it says 0.5 at 3 Hz and 0.25 at 7 Hz. Next, instead of going up by 1 Hz, I'm going to use 0.1 Hz resolution, better resolution. This time, the result seems different than what I would expect because it should only have 2 frequencies, 3 Hz and 7 Hz as before. The thing is, in order to improve frequency resolution, the signal should have sufficient length. And repeating the same process, now we get correct results at 3 Hz and 7 Hz. However, the amplitudes, if you look at them, it looks like we are only finding 50% of the original amplitudes. Why would this be? It's because the Fourier transform has the positive frequency direction as well as the negative frequency direction. This time we find the correct results when we combine at both positive and negative frequencies. One thing to note, the reason the graph shows like this is because the sine is an odd function. Next, I'm going to use the same signal but perform the transform with the cosine function. As you might have expected, the signal I created has 3 Hz and 7 Hz sine signals, so no relationship is found at any frequencies with the cosine function. If I update the signal to have a cosine signal at 3 Hz, then obviously it should show contents at 3 Hz and negative 3 Hz. The reason the graph shows like this is because cosine is an even function. This time the signal has both cosine and sine contents. Cosine at 3 Hz, sine at 7. I'm going to do the cosine portion first and then do the sine portion next. 3 Hz cosine content and 7 Hz sine content. What Euler's formula says is instead of doing this twice, one at a time, we can combine the 2 cosine term and sine term integrals into one and do the Fourier transform. The end result of that is real part is the correlation with the cosine function and the imaginary part is the correlation with the sine function. And bringing you back to the Fourier series, this is how we find these coefficients using the Fourier transform.